Where's my, there we go. Got it. Screen share. You got it.
Okay, so all right, so here's what I've done so far.
Yes.
I've taken your first model
Oh, we're
and
live on YouTube.
okay, cool, no problem. So I've taken your first model and I went through the parcels of land that Lathe put together for us, took all the unit counts. So both sides added up all the units. So I got my 3-story buildings over here, my 4-story buildings over here, studios over here, 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. And I went ahead and just plugged it in, assuming we're dedicating 20% of the units to 50% of the average median income, just for the people that are listening right now. We did that because there is a sale program, which is a gap funding loan at a very low interest rate in the state of Florida that allows you to qualify for that program if you set aside at least 20% of the units for folks making 50% of the AMI. So that's what we decided to do, is 20% split for the 50%, 30% split for the 80%, so that we can get to that 50% to qualify for the tax exempt status using the bond as a finance mechanism for our construction budget. And then the rest I'm putting into market, but I wanted to go through this process with you because I want to make sure I'm plugging these numbers correctly, Alvin. So when I plugged in the market rent, I'm taking the, go ahead.
Before you go forward, perfect spot right there. Go down a little bit more and let's look at that Novogradac table.
Yep.
So for our listeners, what we're doing is we're developing an apartment complex, Odessa, Florida. Kent just said that we've got a SAIL program, SAIL, in the state of Florida that Governor DeSantis just put out. It's an initiative to promote more workforce housing. And so when we look at workforce housing, what we are doing is, Kent just mentioned 20% of the units are set aside for people that make 50% of the area median income. And so I'm gonna give you some real easy numbers. We got the chart right here that shows us what the 50, 60, and 80% rents are and the 100% rents are. But as an easy math, if we've got $100,000 AMI, somebody that's making 80% of that makes $80,000. Somebody that makes 60% of that or 50% of that makes $50,000. The rule of thumb, I remember a long time ago, my mom used to tell me, Alvin, when you get your first apartment, you don't go ever rent an apartment that costs more than 25% of how much you make. That was back in the day. Today, those standards are 30% of what you make. And so HUD sets the standard kind of for that, fair market rents and et cetera. So if you make $50,000 a year, 30% of that is $15,000 a year, divided that you can pay towards housing. Divided by 12, that's $1,250 a month. And so if you've got a person in the 50% income bracket at $100,000 and their rent for a 3-bedroom unit, you can see on this chart, would be set at $1,117. Well, they can afford that because 30% of their rent is $1,250. Now let's just assume that same tenant that makes $50,000 a year, they need a 4-bedroom or they need a 5-bedroom. It's $1,296 and the rent is $1,250, the max that they can pay. That potential tenant that makes $50,000 a year could literally go to the housing authority and get a Section 8 voucher to make up the difference of their rent. That's not always the case, but that typically that's what could happen. And so in the event that does happen, a lot of people think that we lose money on these rents. Well, if that particular tenant went and got a Section 8 voucher, that Section 8 voucher would actually pay market rent. So the market rent for that 4-bedroom unit is not 1207, is actually 2415. So what would happen is that tenant would pay their 30% and the Section 8 voucher would make up the difference. Almost $1,000 difference if you accept the Section 8 vouchers there. Now, the underwriting does not allow us to count that Section 8 voucher rent because it's not dedicated to this property. So we have to underwrite it at the 50 or 60% rent. And if we're able to get a tenant with a Section 8 voucher to come in and pay that market rent, then all that does is help our underwriting. So we're not losing a penny by having a Section 8 tenant. But if you don't have a Section 8 voucher, you're setting those units aside for that person that makes that 50% rent. I just wanted to cover that because a lot of people think that Section 8 causes us to lose money. And it does not. But what we do, this is not a Section 8 property. This is just a market, a workforce housing deal where these units are set aside for people that make that income bracket. They're not always Section 8 vouchers available too, right, Kent? Because there's 7, 8, 9, 10-year wait list in some markets.
Exactly. And I think that's a question I wanted to pose to you, Alvin, right? For the audience members to really learn, well, can't you just, you can't put it into your underwriting, but chances are there are plenty of people on the waiting list. So would one of the ways that you would try to get those above market rents, above the 50% AMI rents is by going to your local housing authority, Alvin, and saying like, hey, we got all these units. Who do you have? Does anybody need a unit? We are building units now. Would you say that's a fair statement?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in that market where the area median income is so high, your Section 8 tenant probably will, and so you can still have standards set in for qualification. So what would that look like in a property like this so that you feel like you're not, and I'm being careful how I say this. Everybody wants the tenant that makes the $50,000, but what about the lady that makes the $20,000 that needs that same unit? The way you have your qualification set up is that tenant needs to make 2.5 times their portion of the rent. So that same tenant at $1,207, he could afford to pay $1,250. 2.5 times that rent, 1,250 times 2.5 is $3,125 a month. This guy makes $50,000 a year. They qualify for that. The person that makes $20,000 a year still does not qualify for that unit, even though that rent is there. So I don't want to say that's one way that you prevent people from turning this into a ghetto because everybody there is on Section 8 voucher and nobody works. And so you have those, because that's what everybody's concerned about. What happens if all these people move in with Section 8 vouchers and they don't have any rent, but I'm getting all my money and it turns this into a place where nobody else wants to live? Well, you have those situations where they still have to qualify based on income, even though they do have a Section 8 voucher. And so it prevents you from having a situation like that.
That's beautifully said, Alvin. And I think that's why people need to understand, like, hey, you have to think about the picture holistically, not just looking at just the numbers. There's definitely multiple opportunities there. So maybe one thing I'll call out here is, Alvin, we use the 4-person average median income from Novogradic. And I think this is something that people need to be conscious about because sometimes people might just look up, hey, average median household income for this address, right? But you would say this is the source that folks should use whenever they are looking at opportunities to determine what the average median income is, correct?
I would say that because everybody in the industry uses this Novogradic rent calculator because that comes directly from her. They're one of the largest accounting firms that specialize in workforce housing or affordable housing. So yeah.
Yep, that's great. Awesome. So here's where we are now. Maybe one more question for you, Alvin, is I put in the rent at market using the 100% AMI. Would you use the 100% AMI as a market rent or would you use the FMR here?
I would use the 100%.
Great. Okay. And that's just a good clarification point for folks that are looking into underwriting properties and help us assess opportunities. I am still waiting for the square footage by unit from one of our partners who does all the site planning. So what I did was I at least saw that the average square footage per unit was 1,020, which is pretty large size for an affordable housing rental. And so we should not have any issues renting it out, even though there's no guarantees. But that's definitely an above average size for an apartment unit. Okay. So Alvin, my question for you is like, okay, I plugged in auto rents, I plugged in auto units, we did the set asides correctly, right? 20% for 50%, 30% for 80%, and then the 50% at the market rents. We plugged in 849 units here, and I briefly estimated that the 1020 per unit, that equals to 865,000 square feet. Unit size at 1020. If we did $230 to build per square foot, that almost equals a $200 million construction budget. How should people estimate the construction budget? Is it by square foot? Do you think it's by unit? What's the right number here to use for underwriting?
If I used this is Florida, and with some of their standards, Kent, I would say no less than 220 a unit. And so by using that square foot, what did that give you a square foot price of? 230?
230 square foot, and that equals to $235,000 construction per unit.
That's really probably kind of high since we have surface parking.
That's a good point.
We don't have any underground parking. We've got more than enough room for that. I bet you we would be somewhere. Let's use a number of a construction square foot right now, Kent, of $200 a square foot.
$200 a square foot. And that's going to get us to 204 per unit.
Let's try that for now.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
What I have seen, we've got hard bids now for Wisconsin of $163 a square foot, and that's with underground parking.
Got it. And can you just clarify for the listeners, like what does hard bid mean? I want to make
hard bid is our general contractor has taken our blueprints, submitted those blueprints to all of the building trades that's going to work on this project, and we've got hard cost numbers. And so we're not speculating on that. So we've got a hard cost number, including a contingency of about 4%, I believe it is. And that's $163 a foot. And again, that's also with underground parking. Now that underground parking is almost $20,000 per car.
Wow.
So you've got 150 cars down there. You got $3-4 million worth of underground parking facilities that if you took off of that construction number, which would lower our cost per square foot, probably close to $140 a foot.
Wow. Underground parking is expensive.
It is expensive. It's cheaper than, I don't know if it's cheaper than, because I haven't compared the pricing, but they're telling me that the wrap buildings that have the 4-story parking garages, that those are somewhere between 28 and 32,000 per car. That's what I've heard. I haven't gotten any hard bids on that, so it's not as expensive as the other, but yeah, parking.
Okay. All right. That's awesome. How about do we want to get into the weeds here and look at the construction for the 2 commercial properties on this property? What do you think?
I don't think so, because I think what we'll have, Ken, is we'll have a lot of commercial frontage available here that we may not want to build out. We may sell it.
Okay.
Partner may say, hey, man, this stuff's worth $10-20 a square foot after all the entitlements and roads and stuff are in place. And that could actually pay for a lot of the infrastructure for this particular set.
Okay. I love that idea. And I think that's something for the listeners to think about, right? If you are building a apartment complex far out from where the big metro areas are, you have to think about, the food deserts or the lack of available retail areas. Like you don't want to just plop in 1,000 units of apartments if there's no supporting infrastructure for people to get groceries, no public transportation. You got to take those factors into account, because that dramatically affects the quality of life of your residents.
That's a fact. And having, what's this, a 40-acre tract of land, it's a really great area. And this thing can size up for over 800 units. Even if we did them in 4 phases of 200 units each, what you'll see by the time you get to the second phase of 200 units, your residents are really starting to move in. This area is picking up, and now you'll have some big box or small box retail need to come in.
Mhm.
There's your grocery store. You'll have your nail salons come in because you got 800 to 1,000 units on a major highway going through this little city. This would actually become a really prime location for this whole community.
Absolutely
Not
love that.
housing, but all the ancillary support that goes with the housing.
Okay. I absolutely love that, because that is literally how you change around communities. You turn around communities and you bring life. You essentially become the heart of a new community. All right. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is we need to go through. Well, let me stop there. Like, what do you usually go, Alvin, after you kind of get your rental units? Do you start in the underwriting tab to go through all your expenses? You start in the budget, think about what your bond issuance needs to be. Where do you start?
I usually start here.
Okay,
We've got the
great.
unit numbers plugged in, right? So we know we've
Mhm.
got the income.
Yep.
So the
Correct.
income is great. So next thing we got to figure out is what are the expenses associated with the income, the administrative costs and all of these things that you've got here.
Yep.
And Kent, what I typically use, and I think it looks like you may have used some of the numbers from that model.
Yeah, from the 400 unit complex that we're developing in Texas.
Yes. So those numbers came directly from our placement agent who sizes this up, because
Mm,
I don't have we can go off of historical data on like administrative costs and things like that on other units because we typically know what those are.
mhm.
Uh, and so following that guidance is what you've done by following the numbers that were in that model. You know, we had a 400 unit deal
Yep.
that we took those operating expenses from our underwriter and said, this is typically what the agencies like to see.
Got
So, for instance, go down to your payroll number.
Yeah. So just so everybody knows, like, right, this is how you bring value to someone with as much experience as Alvin. It's like, hey, when you get some information, you can just leverage and have some general assumptions to launch this conversation. What I did was, hey, I knew that this Excel file was previously used for 400 units. So I said, hey, we're at 893. Let me assume it's about 2 to 2.25x, whatever the expenses are, just so we can have a conversation, and we can always back and adjust off, but this at least helps you have the conversation to begin with and just talk through whether or not these numbers actually make sense. So where did you want to start, Alvin?
Okay. With the manager, the tab.
Got it. There you go. Manager.
So typically that total, that 663,
Mm-hmm.
what our underwriters like to see for payroll is somewhere between 12 and 1450 to $1,500 per unit. And so it's real easy to get there if you think about one person per 100 units on the inside and one person per 100 units on the outside. So you got 800 units. Do we need 8 people on the inside of an office with 800 units? Well, would take the one person per 100 was before a lot of technology, was before COVID, was before virtual events and virtual tours, property
Mhm.
tours. You needed leasing agents and all of that. I'd probably say we need 5 people on the inside of this property. So you've got a manager that's operating a $200 million asset is probably going to make somewhere close to 80 or 90,000 bucks. So I say you got 90 for the assistant manager. I would put that for the manager. I'd probably
90,000.
put
Okay.
for the assistant manager somewhere about 65,000. So
Got it. So what I originally did was I thought, hey, we keep one manager, but we probably need to double up on another assistant manager. So this is like great conversation right now.
and that's a really good approach.
Mhm.
If in that situation, essentially what you're going to have would be 3 strong managers. Then you're going to have a
Mhm.
strong manager and 2 good assistants, right?
Yep.
Which 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. All we did
Mhm.
was flop those numbers around at 90 and 65. You had 65 and 90 for 1 and 2 people. That's a great analogy
Got it.
of how we can get there. And so this underwriting piece is science. This is the part where We can make our work really well, and we need to be able to explain it as long as our numbers match kind of historically what the underwriters want to see.
I think that's such great guidance, Alvin. And I think for people listening right now, you just got to think about, put your position in, like, hey, if you were the owner of this property, how would you run it? Like, you just got to apply some common sense sometimes and think about, well, one strong manager, two assistants, that can make everybody's life a little bit easier, right? There's a career path for everybody, and you're giving the manager enough support so that they can focus on higher level items, and they have the right team in place to help them with other tasks like leasing and et cetera. So we're gonna go 60,000 for each assistant manager and multiply that by 2.
50. I'd stay at 50 if you're gonna do that.
Okay, I love it.
2 at 50. And we are talking, what's the area median income in this area? 87,000. So we've got
89,400.
okay. So and then you've got a manager that's kind of right there at that. That's good. And why would we pay an apartment manager $90,000 a year? Can't take that down to 70 with 2 strong managers. Or with 2 strong assistants.
Okay,
Okay.
take the assistant down to 70. Originally, we have 45,000 times 2.
You can leave those at 50. Leave them at 50.
Okay.
See where we wind up. Okay, and then we've got we're gonna need 2 let's do, we need 2 leasing. I see you've got that. That's at what?
I think you had 2 leasing at 70,000. So I multiplied by 5. So that's really going to get you to the leasing times 3. So you almost have 3 leasing folks.
Perfect. Okay.
Leasing times 3. Boom. You have 2 assistants, 45 each. Senior maintenance, 2 senior maintenance guys.
Yep. 60,000 a piece.
Yep.
You got an assistant, 2 assistants.
2 assistants, 3 leasings, 2 maintenance and porters, and then whatever benefit you had there, I just multiplied by 2 as well.
Okay, we're still a little light on we're at 823. So some people are gonna get some raises, or we can add some more people.
Okay.
You manage it at 90, take your assistants to, you're at 50, give them 55.
Okay.
You got a senior maintenance, so you got 2 maintenance at 60. I'll tell you, our senior maintenance is almost equivalent to what the manager makes, Ken.
Oh, okay.
So I'd give him 80. Give one manager senior maintenance at 80,000.
Mm-hmm.
One of those, and then you'll have 2 assistant maintenance at 60 or at 55, whatever your assistant managers are.
Yep. So that's going to equal to 200.
Okay. 110 senior maintenance. Yep. No, how many of those?
We got 1 senior maintenance plus 2
Take them
lighter senior.
Take them to 55.
55. You got it. You want to line it up with the assistant manager. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. Leasing 45. Can't make your leasing 3 times 45.
3 times 45.
Maintenance and porter 3 times 40. So I guess that's what that is. That's about right. And then benefits would probably total 21% of all of those.
There you go. 889.
There you go. We're close to $1,100. You can give somebody a little raise, and that'll get you to 1,150 to 1,200, and that's what the underwriters like to see.
All right. Love that.
And so just knowing those nuances like that, when we send this to our lender, they know that we have really, these numbers really do work. And so by putting the expenses in, we got the rents in, And then Kent, on the admin and those things, yeah,
Mhm.
those are pretty good. On your repair and maintenance down below 340, 350 a unit, that's good. Only because these are new units. You know, if these were vintage 80s, that may be 450, 500, 550 a unit on repair and make ready, just depending on the condition of the property.
Wow.
The internet.
I just doubled from whatever we had from the 400 units.
That unit that'll be $33 per unit per month.
33 per unit per month on internet. F33.
For an expense.
C32. Support C32.
Okay.
This is way too high then. For internet?
Yeah.
You had 187 before. That's really high.
$187 divided by 187 divided by 400. What's it?
130.
About 12.
If
I
you
had
want 30
$39 a unit per month.
Say that again.
I had $39 a unit per month. It's really about 32 to 33 bucks. And what we do there is we've got a contract with Charter Cable
Okay.
times 12.
Oh, times 12.
Yes. And Charter will provide us with 400 meg internet up and down for 32 bucks a month with 170 channels of streaming TV. So you don't have to buy cable or anything. Our residents don't. We provide that. But then on the income side of that, we get 75 to 90 bucks for that internet as a charge and as a convenience for the resident. So we get to
So we
put
have
that place-
$39 times number of units, which is 849. And then I multiply that by 12. That equals $397,000.
Okay. And then on the income side of that, can you go up to the top? On the other income,
Mm-hmm.
utility
Seven-
reimbursements, internet, 764.
Support E43. So we have a $75 per unit reimbursement.
There you go. That's a big income driver. I mean, that's $500,000 in just internet
Yeah.
between the expense and the income, just because we can provide it.
Yeah.
And it's a
760.
deal for the residents because that package from Charter Spectrum Cable is $150 a month if they picked up the phone and called it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Landscaping, yep. And so all those other numbers typically those are good. I'm going back to your general admin, 370 per door on average. Those are good, Kent.
Okay.
You got 4% property management, real estate taxes.
And multiply by 2.25, what you had there, but we could probably go into the county and try to figure out what the actual property tax rates are here.
I believe in Florida, we're going to be 100% property tax exempt.
Oh. So I'm gonna put that a big fat zero over there.
Yeah. Property insurance in Florida, let's make that close to 900 a door.
900 a door. Boom. $2.7. 50. I'm gonna leave it at 919 a door if you're okay with that, because the wind insurance there is kind of getting crazy.
Close enough. Issuer fees on this? Put $1.5 million.
$1.5 million. You got it.
No. I'm sorry. Go. You can leave that. That's the annual expense. I was thinking about the cost on the front end. So you take those. Did you?
I didn't update the G9 yet, so
We just
budget.
took out the property taxes, and that lowered our expense ratio to about 28%. Put your property tax back in and see this would be 800 units. It'd probably be closer to $1.5 million.
Wow. That's a big difference. You're going from 36
That's what I wanted.
10%.
There you go. There you go.
That's a 10% difference.
Real numbers. Those
Love
are
it. All right. So we've gone through the underwriting page now.
Then what we would do is let's go to your, where's the part of this where we have our capital stack?
We'll
Budget.
go to the budget first. Yeah.
How much interest reserve do we have in here?
Let's go to cash flows, interest reserves. For 3 years.
There you go. Yeah. Now, let's talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
We got 26, 27, $33 million in interest reserve. In it. And the reason that is because if during these bond transactions, all of the bonds are issued at one time, and you're paying debt service on all of the bonds at one time. So when I talked about doing 800 units in 4 phases of 200, we would save 2/3 of that interest reserve.
So this is the interest reserve you're talking about, the interest expense.
That's correct.
All
Because
right,
that's
33 million.
yeah, that's paying for the bonds from day one on the whole development, which we can't build all 800 units at one time.
Mhm.
So it would really benefit us to break this into 4 tranches of 200. Because then the interest reserve on 200 units at 220 a door is, 44 million. Cost and everything may be 60 million because we got 220 for 800 units. So you'll have roughly 220, or you'll have roughly 65 million for 200 units. The interest on 65 versus the interest on 220 is a whole lot less. And so we would only be building a couple of hundred units at a time anyway. I mean, as the site goes around, we could probably start 400 comfortably. But if we did it in 2 phases, or 4 phases of 200, or once we get the first 2 phases up and then do the last 2, I mean,
all together.
Yeah, that 33 million would turn into 15 or 20 million in interest reserve, which really helps the underwriting of this a whole lot more. But just for purposes of what we've done thus far, I see that. Okay, let's
we should probably go into how much bonds we actually need, right?
That's what I'm about to see. Yeah.
Yeah.
231, that's 255.
So all I did so far, just to have the conversation started, was I just took it and multiplied by 2.25 proportionally to the number of units, right? Because we're 893, but I'm going to say 900 units so that we have nice, easy round numbers. 900 units compared to 400 units. That's how I got to 2.25.
Okay. And only thing I want to do here is see, we've got a total of 173 for construction, FF&E, contingency, soft costs, 190 million, consulting fees, developer fees, reserve.
So all that's come through is the par amount is multiplied. We haven't touched the purchase price of the land yet.
We can leave that.
We pulled together the construction budget from the prior page just so everybody is following. FF&E, we just multiplied everything by 2.25 again from what was existing for 400 units, which is proportionally just to get a sense, to analyze the deal and see whether or not the idea even makes sense. Same thing for consulting fee and developer fee. Now, my question to you is Alvin, do we see any synergies? The larger the project, do we actually see these expenses go down, or does it pretty much make sense for a proportional increase in all these expenses?
It does. And Florida will allow you to charge up to 16% developer fee.
Oh, wow.
I think that's probably 4 or 5%.
Yeah, that's really low.
That doesn't mean you get it all on the front end. Some of that could be deferred. So if you had going down, Ken, and let's talk about this a little bit more. Okay, perfect. So we've got 255 million total uses of funds, okay?
Yep.
With
We
the
haven't
amount of-
updated any of these cost of issuance yet, just to be clear. We have not updated any of the cost of issuance, just in case that's not proportionally increasing there.
That typically does not.
Great. That's what I
Oh.
thought too.
Yeah, they stay pretty flat. So what you're looking at is we've got a negative 337,000. That means we would putting in, where's our equity contribution of 19,265,000. We are so actually minus the 337, we got 18,900,000 we bring to the table to close. We've got a $16 million developer fee. If we wanted to defer our complete developer fee and make no money at closing, we'd only need $3 million to close.
Great point. And just so people are following, right?
Yes.
Equity contribution for the construction, 19 million, developer fee of 16 million. If you defer that, that's what Alvin is saying for the 3 million.
That's correct. And so nobody wants to do that. But if you had a $16 million developer fee, I mean, if you had a 16% developer fee, let's just say 231 million times 10% is 23 million. So now going down to your bottom of the capital stack again, and let's see how much equity we would need now instead of having cost of issuance. We had a negative 300,000 that we would need to bring 6 million to the table. You defer that 6 million out of your 23 million, and that's how you get down to a place of zeroing out your cash. And then that developer fee that's deferred is the first thing paid out of the capital stack before any distributions. So after your debt service, expenses, and all those things are covered at the end of the year or twice a year, you're actually able to take distributions from this development, and the distributions would go towards the developer fee first before anybody else got paid if you deferred your developer fee that way.
Got it. And that was assuming a developer fee of 23 million.
Correct.
75,000.
Correct.
And 10% is pretty standard for the industry. What do you think there, Alvin?
Well, on
Developer
tax credit deals like that, the developers max it out. They always max it out. On deals like this with the bonds, we typically do see anywhere from 2 to 4%. I have no need to do that because they're doing that from a tax credit perspective, and they get maximum benefit. Their tax credit partners that buy the credits get maximum benefit, and just deferring their developer fee. Sometimes they don't get that developer fee, that deferred piece, for 15 years until it's paid out and the property is sold. That could be the first thing paid at that time. So typically it's just a gap filler when you're doing that.
Okay. And then for the purposes of us, we use 10% for the developer fee, but you just said 2 to 4%. Should that be multiplied by 2% then, or 4%?
Do 4%.
Okay.
What it looks like. That's good.
9.27.
$10 million.
Okay.
4.5%.
4.5%. That gets 10.4 million.
There you go. Hey, Mr. Camper, I'm on a Zoom call real quick. I haven't forgot about you. Give me a few minutes and I'll buzz you right back, okay?
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. And so now we've got a negative $6 million gap. So can't close that with the bonds. Let's see, 231.
6.22. No, 6.25 million. Oh, wait. Let's subtract it.
Yeah. That's cool.
7.28. Now you're.
That's
you
perfect.
pass.
We bring 200,000 to closing. And now let's go to your underwriting tab. Let's go to your support tab. Let's go to debt service. Okay. All right, let's go down the page. Okay. And now let's go to the cash flows. And that's what I was looking for, debt service coverage ratio. And after year 4, 117 debt service coverage on a deal like this, they typically look for 115 to 120. So this works. And affordable, they'll let us go down to 115. But if we stay above 120, we're always golden. This thing with 800 units probably wouldn't be stabilized in the 3rd year. So by the time you get to 4 years, you're really close to that. This pro forma with these numbers work. I would just say that they work because we're going to break this into maybe half, maybe two 400 unit deals, and we'll have a lot less interest to cover. And so when we peel out that, we had $33 million in interest reserve, you peel that down to 20 million because we're doing it in 2 halves. Pull 13 million off of those bonds, you hit your debt service coverage ratio really easily.
Got it. So what we would like to do is just somehow set up an additional tranche of debt to begin later. Well, in your opinion, how long is it going to take for the second tranche of what do you think the second tranche of assets, right? If we're to do 200, 200, and then $400 ones, where would you generally gauge that timing to take place for the last 400?
Maybe we do 400 and 400.
Okay. All right.
Just break it into half. Oh, 850 and 450 and 450 because we were close to 900, right?
Yep.
And then the market will dictate when the second phase comes on.
Oh, that's a great point.
You know, I'm sure we'll get a market study. I'm sure that it'll say that community needs 5,000 units of housing, and it'll give us the market study will give us the absorption rate. So if you build 400 units, this is how long it'll take for those to be filled. And so we'll follow that market data. We'll base our assumptions on starting the second 200 off of that data. And then we'll see real time if that data is correct as we fill up the first 400 units.
Got it. So let me kind of summarize then for what I've learned from you so far, Alvin. We've gone through all the different unit counts. We've plugged in all the numbers. We've at least had some semblance of the G&A, general administrative costs. We figured out, hey, even if we were to build all 900 units all at once, our debt service coverage ratio still qualifies. So that's how you quickly realize that, hey, this is a deal if we were to pursue it further.
Correct.
And that's why the next step is really figuring out, well, we know that even if we build all 800 units, it's still a deal. It's definitely, or theoretically, common sense dictates that it should be a deal if we split them up into separate tranches of 400 units, because we get to save on interest reserves. And that now we need the market study. And now, if I were to say it differently, we should spend a little bit more money to figure out the market and complete the market study so that we can figure out what the demand is for that market to see where now we want to proceed. Would you say that's like the best next step here?
That's correct. We know, and so the guy, our other potential partner that brought this to us had a price of the land of $5.5 million. So we have 7.5 plugged in there. So we still have a cushion there. But absolutely, the next step here would be the market study. Now, do we go and pay $5,000 for a market study? Probably not. We pick up the phone and we call the Economic Development Department of the city of Odessa, tell them we're looking at building 800 units on this particular property. And do you guys mind sharing your current market study that you've already had done? About every city has already done a market study.
And boom, that's how you guys save $5,000 right away.
You may need your own. You may need
True.
your own, but at least we've got one that could be, because they may have done it in 2020.
Great
This
point.
is 3 years later. You know, they typically do this every 10 years or so, maybe every 5 years, just depending on how big the city is, their growth, and et cetera. But if you got one that's 3 years old, at least we'll know Okay, well, it said 5,000 units 3 years ago. We can look back and see how many units have come online. And
Mhm.
actually, that market study will show you what's coming online in the next 2 to 3 years if the permits have been pulled at that time.
I
So at
see.
least it'll give us, we'll know if it's feasible. If they need 5,000 units and 4,000 have come on 3 years ago, they may not need any more units.
Okay, got it. So Alvin, I know you had another call to come in. I will take what I just learned from you and I will apply it to our other parcel in Clearwater, and we can get back on the phone a little bit later. But at least now we're prepared to have these conversations with the folks that brings us the land deal. So just to kind of give everybody a quick semblance of timeline, right? We got this deal. We quickly analyzed it. Probably took us about a day to get the site plans all set up. And you guys literally just saw how long it took us to plug it into an Excel spreadsheet. We can normally turn around a response within like 2 or 3 days, assuming everybody is available. But
Right.
chances are give us a whole week. But we can turn around and quickly understand, like, hey, should we move forward or not? And I think this is the process we want to teach other people, because everybody has been reaching out to us and asking, how do we get involved? How do we bring you guys deals? That's what it looks like. And we're happy to train you guys.
That's correct. And the reason we're willing to do that is because we're building 20,000 units. And the way
Yeah.
20,000 units is we need to partner with people like you that can go out and find these deals and bring us land opportunity. And that's the easiest way to get started in multifamily development. Ken and I are sitting here putting these deals together. We've got other partners that help us with the land planning and the design of the buildings and things like that. We'll complete the underwriting, and like I said, we can get back surely within a week. And then if it's a go, then there are some other ways we move forward from here. I will say that we don't want everybody to go find a piece of land and say, here's 20 acres, here's 30 acres, no. We're looking for properties that can be, in somebody's professional opinion, replatted for multifamily housing. So we're not looking at anything close to a landfill, nothing right up on a freeway, nothing in an area. And the most important part is the area median income for the community. We're not going to Mississippi. We're not going to Flint, Michigan, where they don't have water. We're not going to places where nobody wants to move. We're going to areas of growth and demand. Those market studies typically show us if you've got an economy that's going this way or going this way. And so everything that we're doing, again, is in a path of growth. We primarily really like areas that have area median incomes over 80,000. Sometimes we can make the $70,000 area median incomes work. But if they're in that range, then at least it's worth a discussion to do what we just did, to see if we can make the math work. And those are the two most critical things. And then if from this point, we see that this thing is feasible to go further. Why would, so somebody brings this to us and here it is. They don't have the money. They don't have a plan. We figure out this could be a feasible project. What's the expectation from the person that brought us the deal, the land? Do you have any resources or any connections or relationships that can help this get funded? Because it takes money to buy this. It takes money to do all the things that we're doing right now. And so those are all the kind of things that as you go out, and you'll never see land the same after you look at this, where this 40 acres can turn into a $250 million development. That's construction costs. We didn't look at the long-term value what this thing's going to be worth in 10 years with a 6 or 7% cap rate, probably close to $500 million. And so what's the upside for everybody involved in this? How do we prime the pump? How do we start paying professionals to do engineering? And there are all kinds of things that go with this. So I just want people to keep in mind that when you find a piece of property and you say, hey, Kent, hey, Alvin, here's a deal, let's do it. Okay, it's feasible now. Where do we go from here? Right? Where do we go? What resources do we have to bring this thing together? And if we've got 10 other deals going on and you brought this one and it looks good, it's feasible, but we got 10 other deals going on. Why would we want to put this one in front of one of the other ones if those other ones have resources and this one has no resources? So those are a lot of things for us to think about in the process of reaching out to each other. This is easy. Well, this isn't hard. This is very expensive. This costs a lot of money. but this builds a lot of work. You don't have to have the money. You don't have to have the opportunity. You don't have to have the experience, but you may need to have one of those or the opportunity. You don't need all four of them, but you will need one of them. And it helps if you have a couple of them. And we can get people to help bring the rest of the team together, rest of the stack. If the deal's right. A good deal always finds the money is what they tell me. Have you heard that, Kent?
I heard they just drop from the sky when you have a good deal.
That's good. Well, man, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Call my friend back and get him taken care of this morning. And I told Bina you and I have had a lot of time together. So she said hi.
And
I
then
said, well, you know,
will.
Kent. I said, you remember Kent? She said, yeah, I connected you with him. I'm like, oh, okay.
Because you were at a meetup yesterday, right? That was cool.
Courtney had a meetup yesterday. Really interesting. There were about 40 people there. And so she did this thing called Empire Connect, just connecting opportunities and people and relationships. Yeah. And it was really, really good. I met a couple of guys there that one guy's doing some trade platform stuff. I've heard about that. That was, and then I met some other lenders there that love what this kind of stuff. A couple of guys that I was able to introduce to the tax-exempt bond strategy. A couple of investors looking at parking some big money into some of these deals, because with the bond financing, our partners, I won't call them investors, our partners that come along with money get to become part of the debt stack of those bonds. So on that spreadsheet, Kent showed us our equity injection. That's the equity that's from us. Well, what we do is we partner with people to bring that equity, and those people get to become a part of the debt stack on this deal, not a limited partner, a debt stack. Debt always gets paid, especially in a deal that is not over leveraged. Now you hear about debt getting written down, that's because it's over leveraged. You just saw us do a model that shows this thing underwrites really well. We had in year 4, when we're not even stabilized, we got a debt service coverage of 117, and then it went up to 125 or something like that. That debt service coverage means that you've got our lenders look for a minimum of a 115. They like a 125. But what that means is this. Let's assume that your mortgage is $100 a month. At 115, they want us to have a 15% overage of that amount. So you need to be bringing in $115 a month in order to cover your mortgage. And those other 15% should cover all your other expenses and leave a net profit for you. That's why they like to see 125, 130 debt service coverage. If you got 130, that means you're collecting $130 a month, paying your mortgage, and now you got $30 left over to cover your expenses and et cetera. So when you're looking at, and that's what we were looking at when I said that's what I was looking for on that spreadsheet, to see exactly where our debt service coverage ratio fell. You'll hear people call it DSCR, debt service coverage ratio, debt service, whatever. But that's what they're referring to. And those are the things that drive this. So when you see a situation where you've got ample debt service coverage without it being 100% occupancy, because Ken also had some vacancy numbers built into that. He had some bad debt numbers built into that. Bad debt, people that live there that don't pay rent. You're going to always have that. And you're not going to always be 100% occupied. You may be 93, 94, 95%. So when you've got a good debt service coverage ratio, less than 100%, somewhere between 92 and 95%, the debt always gets paid. And so those partners that become part of the debt stack, all of their money, all of the returns that they make on their money are exempted from federal income tax. And so that opens up a whole nother array of institutional style investors that say, you mean I could put $100 million here and not pay taxes on my gains? Absolutely. And so 10 million, 20 million, 5 million, whatever that number is, absolutely. And not pay tax as long as those bonds are outstanding. So that means as long as you're a bondholder, you are not paying taxes on your gains. Now, what happens typically in these deals, somewhere between year 3, well, this is a big deal, but let's just assume we did 400 units and 400 units, or 450 and 450, somewhere between year 3 and year 7. Well, let me back up. And I'll use some easy round numbers. We got $100 million worth of bonds being allocated. This was 200. We're going to do half of it. We've got 100 million. Our placement agents go out to the market and sell 90% of those bonds. We come in with 10% cash. So that makes up 100% of the deal. That 90% is sold to the open market prior to closing, and our 10% comes in. That funds 100% of the capital stack. That 100% covers all the construction, covers all the debt service reserve, paying the mortgage for 2.5 or 3 years, however long we build in. And it stacks all the capital accounts so that when this property is built, there's ample money for reserves and all the things that this new thing needs to run. This property gets built, it starts operating, it starts printing money. And what happens between year 3 and year 7, typically around year 5, that last 10% of the bonds are sold to the market. So those bonds have been paid for 3, 4, 5, 6 years on time every month. So that means you've got aged paper. You've got a payable that has been aged 3 to 5 years with perfect credit history of paying. That's how you like building your personal credit. This thing has established good credit. So those bonds at that point can be sold at 101 to 105, 110. What does that mean? I got $1 worth of bonds. I'm gonna get $1.10 for it. I get $1.20 for it. So that's 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. I get $1.30 for it. Why would you get more than the face amount of that bond? Well, that bond has proven itself to be a very valuable asset because it has been paying on time and it has a long-term benefit to the bondholder. So our placement agent will take those last 10% of the bonds and sell them on the open market for entities that buy these bonds. And that replenishes all of our investors' money, 100% of it. So the debt always gets paid. Our partners are no longer debt holders. They have been recouped all of their money somewhere between year 3 and year 7. 100% of those returns that you've made for that whole period are exempted from your income tax. You don't have to pay tax on it. So if you invested $100,000 at a 10% interest, or if you invested $10 million at a 12% interest, or whatever the rate is that we negotiate with you for your investment, all of that return has been exempted from your taxes, and you get recouped 100% of your funds when those bonds are sold. And that's how this process works. That's how we fund these properties. That's how we build them. That's how we partner with people in the process of doing this. That's how we bring institutional investors in to realizing some tax exempt earnings, high net worth individuals realizing some tax exempt earnings. And we're providing a great product. We're providing workforce housing for a population of people that make somewhere between 60 and 80% of the area median income in any given area, and maybe 50 in Florida because there's some incentives to go down to the 50% market. And that's what we're doing. And we're doing this, doing good while doing good is what we call it.
And for disclaimer now, it's like, this is not investment, legal, tax advice. This is not
Correct.
a solicitation for any sort of investment funds. All the stuff was meant for information and entertainment uses only.
Correct.
And Alvin, I mean, we can't talk about all the good stuff without the bad stuff, right? So people must be asking, like, hey, what if it doesn't get built? Tell us some of the downside risks there. What happens if it doesn't get built?
Well, I'm not going to say that won't happen, but the chances of that are happening are very slim to none. We have chosen a contractor to work with us that is present in 9. They have a physical presence in 9 states, offices. They've been in business 75 years. They only build apartments and senior living facilities. So this is their business. Their balance sheet is over 200 million. They are bondable up to no cap. Well, I'm not going to say no cap or no top, no ceiling on their bond amount, but they told me that easily $100 million per project is a bond. You know, this one's a little bit more than that. If we did 400 and 400, so that would just be extended. But what that bond means and the performance and completion guarantees that they give us is that they will complete the project, guaranteed. If they don't, then their performance bond will kick in, we'll pull on that, and that bond will pay for the completion of that project too. So we will be delivered a product. The thing that could happen. We had COVID happen 3 years ago. Prices went through the roof on everything. Well, we've got a pretty substantial contingency built into all of our construction budgets. And so hopefully, that won't happen again, that we won't see the world shut down for a year again. So we try to ensure our way around situations like that with the performance bond, the completion guarantees, and et cetera. There are just some things that you can't stop from happening. There's nobody on the planet that can stop a hurricane or a tsunami or any of that. And those things just happen, but we have insurance to protect us against the completion. That's what the performance bonds are. And then we've got surely hazard and liability insurance to protect us against something that's not man-made that can happen.
All right. And then the last verse is just like you said it the best. If you build it, will they come? And you can argue that affordable housing is a big crisis in the United States. And that's why we're doing a market study, right? We're not making this up. We have the market study being performed so that we're not making up these numbers. We're not making up the demand. There's actual third party that verifies that there is demand for this large of a development.
That's correct.
Awesome. This was fun, Alvin. I learned so much. I'm sure the audience did too. So I appreciate your time, man.
No, thank you, man. This is a good one. So, your partner brought it to us. We sized it up for him. You're going to set a meeting with him and we're going to walk through it and show him all the scenarios.
Yeah.
And see if we want to go forward with it.
All right. Love it.